My name's Neil Humphrey and I'm the Academic Lead for the Be Well programme. And in this short video, I'll be talking through our recent analysis focusing on patterns of young people's participation in arts, culture and entertainment activities and whether they predict their later well-being. The first thing I need to do is explain a statistical technique called latent class analysis. Simplest way to do that is to get you to picture this kind of quiz, which I'm sure you'll have seen in the back of a magazine. There's a series of items, multiple choice responses, and based on the pattern of responses, you're classified into one of several groups. So in this case, based on the pattern of responses, you're either Little Miss Hipster, a hop away from hip, or hardly hip. Latent class analysis is basically a more sophisticated approach to classifying people based on their survey responses. In this particular analysis, we were interested in young people's participation in arts, culture and entertainment activities, or PACE for short. So you can see here the series of items that we use in the Be Well survey, which are adapted from the Millennium Cohort study. In this analysis, we had about 18,000 young people in the Be Well longitudinal cohort who had completed surveys for us in 2021 when they were in year 8 and in 2022 when they were in year 9. So we were interested in, first of all, looking at whether there were patterns of PACE, different distinct groups or latent classes that we could identify in the data set. Having done that, we were interested in finding out what socio-demographic characteristics predicted PACE group membership, and then really importantly, whether PACE group membership predicted later well-being. So we collect our data, we run our analysis, and this is what we find. So this is a visual depiction of what our latent class analysis showed. So the latent class analysis identified 4 distinct groups of young people. The first one I want to highlight is the yellow line. So the yellow line, which we called the activity-free association, that's about 1 in 5 young people in our data set, and they're characterised by very low levels of engagement in most PACE activities. So you can see there their scores drag across the bottom in everything except for video games. So for almost everything else, they have very low levels of engagement. I want to contrast that with the light blue line. This is about 12% of the sample that we call the dynamic doers. And what you can see there is they have much higher levels of engagement across a whole range of PACE activities. Somewhere in between those two extreme groups, we have the mind and body crew and the game and gain squad. Now the game and gain squad are about 29-30% of the sample, and they're characterised by high levels of engagement in video games and in playing sports and exercise. So young people in the game and gain squad primarily spend their leisure time playing video games or engaging in sports or exercise. The mind and body crew, who are about just under 40% of the sample, they're similar to the game and gain squad in that they play video games and engage in sports and exercise, albeit to a slightly lesser extent, but they're also characterised by the fact that they're also likely to engage in kind of arts and craft activities and reading for enjoyment, hence we call them the mind and body crew. So 4 distinct groups that emerged from our latent class analysis. So the first thing we do is look at what socio-demographic factors predict membership of any one of these 4 groups. So I'm just going to highlight for you here a couple of examples. First of all, if you look at the bottom row, the dynamic doers compared to the activity-free association, what we find here is that dynamic doers spend less time on social media than the activity-free association. If we look up and look at the game and gain squad compared to the activity-free association, and also the mind and body crew compared to the activity-free association, we see that both of those groups are less likely to be socioeconomically disadvantaged than the activity-free association. So you can see a range there of socio-demographic differences between these different groups. And then the final part of the analysis is looking at whether PACE group membership predicts later well-being. And what we find is that it very clearly does. So what you can see here these are depictions of young people's well-being scores, their psychological well-being scores in 2022 And these analyses control for their prior levels of well-being plus all of those socio-demographic factors that I mentioned earlier and that were on the previous slide. So things like social media use, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. So what we can see immediately here are that the dynamic doers, the group who have that wide-ranging engagement in PACE, have the highest well-being scores. And in fact, they're significantly higher than the activity-free association and the mind and body crew. If you also then look at the game and gain squad, you can see that their wellbeing scores are significantly higher than the mind and body crew and the activity-free association. So basically, in almost all contrasts, the young people who are most disengaged from PACE, the activity-free association, have significantly lower wellbeing scores than most of the other groups. So we've got a really clear indication here that patterns of participation and engagement in arts, culture, and entertainment activities are predictive of their later well-being. So what does all this mean then in terms of policy and practice? Well, first of all, approximately 1 in 5 young people in Greater Manchester are disengaged from participation in arts, culture and entertainment activities. And we've got some evidence that there are socioeconomic factors and other demographic factors that influence the likelihood of their engagement. So an immediate thing that we need to do is to prioritise and promote engagement through provision in and out of school to make arts, culture and entertainment activities more accessible and appealing to all young people. The second thing though that I want to highlight is the potential importance of video gaming. So one distinguishing feature between the game and gain squad and the mind and body crew, those two groups in the middle, is that the game and gain squad spend more time playing video games than the mind and body crew. Now, video gaming has had a bit of a bad rep in the press and in society, but what our data shows is that time spent playing video games may actually be time well spent. The game and gain squad have significantly higher well-being than the mind and body crew and the activity-free association, and one of the key distinguishing features is the amount of time they spend playing video games. So we perhaps need to shift our perception of how productive time spent playing on video games may be for young people in terms of their social connections, in terms of their emotion regulation, and in terms of a whole range of other things that video gaming may be beneficial for.